Well, hello, and good morning, and welcome to Intercultural Spark, that show about the spark inside each of us that sparks you to change, to drive change in the world. And boy, that spark is on fire with our guest today, Dr. Isabel Olson, who's the founder of the Salt and Light Coalition. And I called the show, when you can't unsee, you act, because she saw a need in the world related to survivors of human trafficking and kept saying, why? And there just were not good answers or good solutions. And so she jumped into action, creating the Salt and Light Coalition. It's an amazing program, and we're going to learn about it with our guest today. So welcome to Intercultural Spark. Hi, Isabel. How are you? Good morning.
Hi, how are you? I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am good. And I'm so excited you are here. I had heard once, it was an article that I read, and it said that for working women, we could choose, it was work, fitness, family, friends. And they're like, you can only have 3 of them. And then I met you, and I'm so jealous because I feel like you're doing all of them and some.
Yeah.
And I'm talking
I try. It's like my life is chaos most of the days. Like right now, I'm trying to do e-learning and run Salt and Light Coalition and try to be a mother and a wife. And it's been interesting, that's for sure. I just walked down to my daughter in her choice time, and she was doing the Macarena with the lights off, and it looks like a club down there. It's really interesting.
Now, was that part of her schooling, or was that just something she was doing on her own?
Well, it's supposed to be choice time, but that was
choice time.
Yeah, so she created that club down there. So yeah, it's been an interesting season, that's for sure.
Oh, that's so funny. How old is your daughter who's doing this? That's great.
She is 6. She is 6 years old.
Yeah. I love it with the lights and the Macarena. Fantastic. Well, just like you, she's already designed to be like a showrunner and a person who's making change and taking control of her life. So I want to lead us up to how you founded the Salt and Light Coalition, which is doing an amazing work on working with helping women thrive who have been saved from human trafficking. Mm. But what I found fascinating, Isabel, is the story of how really it started with your dad, who was a political prisoner when you were growing up in Brazil. Can you maybe give us an idea of that thread that started there that led you where you are?
Of course. So, I grew up in Brazil. My dad was a lawyer, and I really recall some interesting memories with him growing up. He worked for the people. He was a labor lawyer at a time when most of the businesses were government owned, right? Mm-hmm. And so in a way, he was fighting against the government at that time. And I remember that a lot of the people that he worked for, they didn't have money to pay for his fees and such. And so they would bring in the most interesting presents. So I remember one day my dad brought a baby alligator home. I've seen chickens and eggs, and, they've gifted him all kinds of interesting things. So that's like a very clear memory that I have of my dad. But when I was 12, my dad was basically arrested. He went away for about 9 years. And it was just his charges was very politically charged. They had no evidence against him.
What year was this? Because I think a lot of people don't know. So Isabel and I met each other. My husband's Brazilian. So of course we had the immediate Brazilian connection. But I think a lot of people don't realize that Brazil, which is now a democracy, was a military government from 64 to I think 84, somewhere around there. So yeah. Was this during that time?
Oh, no, this was 1992. So it was after.
Oh, wow.
But for many, many years, even though Brazil was a democracy, a lot of the things were state owned. And, the democracy, I think it took a long time to really become a democracy, I would say, in Brazil.
Sure.
So this was after. And so he went to jail for about 9 years, even though, he was a primary and he had really no records or anything. He was never able to, usually, you do 50% of your sentencing, you're able to get out. That never happened to my dad. He was there till the last day, and even in the last day, was like hard to get him out of jail. And that really impacted like my childhood. One day I just didn't have a dad anymore at home, and I didn't have the support of a parent. I ended up actually, everything was on the media. It was just like everybody was talking about it. And at 15, I get a scholarship to come to the Herod Conservatory in Florida. And this is a boarding school for dancers. If you're on, like, it's a great school. It was a great chance for me. I was a young dancer, very talented. And here I am in Florida. But, I didn't have my parents around. I didn't really have guidance. I was basically here by myself. And I went to the school, and I ended up meeting this person and fall in love with him. He is probably, I think at the time, 16 years my senior. End up being in a relationship with him. I actually get married. It's like oh my gosh, my story is like very long, but I'll try to shorten it. I get married, find out he's married after I have a baby, and then he abandoned us. I go back to Brazil, somehow get into college. Anyway, let's fast forward all these years. Actually find out afterwards that he was like in the most wanted FBI list. It's like a crazy.
Oh my God, you're kidding. That is crazy. Wow.
And then fast forward many, many years. I'm back in the US here. I'm getting my PhD. I'm married. And
is that how you ended up at Northwestern, or ended up in Chicago? Because you got your PhD from Northwestern. Okay.
That is correct. So how I ended up here is like a year after my child was born, or 2 years after, I met my husband in Brazil during Carnival. And we dated 7 years long distance. I had a career there. He had his career here. It was like we really loved each other, but it kind of took a long time for us to really, like get married, because you never know how long this relationship is going to pan out. But after 7 years, we decided like, let's go for this. And so I came to the US, and I was like, well, should I go back to school to get my teaching license, because I was a teacher in Brazil, or should I just go for the PhD? So I applied to a bunch of schools, ended up getting into the Northwestern at the time in 2008, I think, 2009. And that's how I ended up there. Now, were
you already volunteering at, by the way, you so well-deserved after your earlier awful experience, because your husband, who I've met, is like one of the nicest people in the world. I mean, he's a great person. So nice when the universe kind of goes around and brings back to people what they deserve. But were you already, so you also had said that because of your experience of your dad, being in jail growing up, that led you to volunteer teaching yoga at Cook County Jail when you came to Chicago. So was that about the same time?
No, actually. So what happened is I was going through my PhD. My thesis was actually done in Brazil. I studied how people thought about complex systems in the favelas of Brazil. And I was really into that. I really wanted to make an impact in this, in the educational system. And what I realized is that you work, but really making impact is really hard from an academia standpoint, because there's so much red tape, there's so much ego in academia. And I felt really disillusioned towards the end of my, 6-year PhD career or whatever. And so when I graduated, I felt like, I started putting, my resume out, trying to get a job as a professor, started getting all these offers, but none of the offers were in Chicago. And I was pregnant with my daughter then. And I had to make a choice. Like, do I want to do dual residency with a baby, or do I want to just, I don't know, do something else? And I kind of took a hard look into myself, and I said, I want to do something else actually, because I don't want to break my family. And so I went at that point, and I said, what is that I want to do? And I really had no idea. I was like, I don't know, do I want to go into acting? I really had no
Oh
idea.
my God. And what you're doing is so much deeper than that, which is funny because even Myers like a little bit deeper question, like what's your life's main goal? And I
Yeah.
think that what's interesting, what I'm finding fascinating, and thank you for that question, Meyer, is and he's impressed with your story to reach where you are now. And what's also equally impressive about it is that you're so focused with the Salt and Light Coalition and helping so many people. And so it's fascinating to me that you had all these different things of like, well, what should I do? So
Mm.
what do you think it was? Tell us a little bit about Salt and Light. And then what was that? Oh my God. So you've got, this is fascinating, Isabel. You've got the baby, you've got the second marriage, all these things that have happened. Do tell though, the work that you're doing at Salt and Light is so powerful and so meaningful. So how did you know, like what drove you inside that you had to create that? And by
So
the way, for people who are watching live, thank you for your question, but we love questions and say hello if you're watching live. So thanks.
sure. So basically that's what happened. So I decided not to go into academia, and I found out that my teacher, my yoga teacher, was teaching yoga at the Cook County Jail at the time. And
Okay.
like that kind of hit me because that's the population, that kind of
Yeah.
really speaks to my heart. I started teaching yoga there, and what I saw was a gap. Oh, I found out that
Mhm.
70% of the women in the Cook County Jail had been arrested on their charges of trafficking
You
or
said that was
rape.
70%, right?
70.
70%?
Yeah. It
Wait,
was
why
something
are they charged for trafficking? If they're
so
victims, how are they charged?
So basically, prostitution is a misdemeanor. So lots of time they won't be charged for prostitution, but they will commit
Mm,
crimes that they're coerced to commit at that time. So either they carry drugs for a man, and then
mhm,
the guy never gets arrested. They do, or
mm.
there's a lot of things that may happen
Wow.
that puts them there, and it's usually related to having been trafficked. And I started looking at the organization in Chicago, and what I saw is a lot of people had shelters, a lot of people provided that first step
Mhm.
outside of their trafficking situations, but nobody was providing the after the after work, right? Like, how do we really get people to start working? Because it's a vicious cycle. 62% of women are trafficked before the age of 18. They don't get
Wow.
training. They don't get their high school diplomas. They don't develop a work history. They acquire records. So how can we get them in the workforce? You can't, because you can't find a legitimate job even if
Mm,
you try, because of all those things. And so I wanted to break that, and I thought that the best way to do that was through job training.
mhm,
And recognizing the immense amount of trauma that women undergo, I thought that first they needed to go through kind of a healing, uh, basically session, so I developed a curriculum where first people would go through healing, and then people would go through workforce development. Does that make
mhm.
sense?
Well, I
And
do. And what I really love, though, that just the whole idea of movement and look, I even have to like act it out as I say it. The idea of, because there's that whole component of the yoga and the fitness. And I love the idea of, because that's all about just loving your body and being comfortable in your body. And I'm guessing, I would imagine people have been victims of human trafficking. You almost have to disassociate from your physical being to survive.
right, that's very correct. Disassociation is very common. And so basically, we want women to get into their bodies, to rediscover
Mhm,
their bodies. And there is where yoga comes in. That's where the fitness classes that you teach sometimes come in.
mhm,
Really getting to rediscover your body as a
mhm,
safe space. And so that's the idea behind Salt Lake Coalition, was actually looking back at my life when my dad went to jail, and
mhm,
my life was very parallel to a lot of the women here at Salt Lake Coalition, right? A lot of the things happened. And I think one of the things that really bothered me at that moment
mhm.
was, why wasn't I trafficked and they were? And what I saw in
Oh,
my life was
interesting.
protective factors. So the protective factor of education, the protective factor of a very strong mother who was always there for me, the protective
Mhm,
factor of having faith, of having dance. So dance is a cathartic experience. Like, you just
mhm,
get all out, right? So having that outlet, like all those things were protective factors. So what I wanted to do with Salt Lake Coalition when I built it was to create those protective factors for women so that they can engage in a lifelong healing journey and not only heal, but also be placed in the workplace.
mhm. That's fascinating because even just when you look at societal inequity, the fact that you sensed, like I had the exact same instances in my life that someone, because I think you also had said that the vast majority of women who are attractive are that are trafficked are women of color. Is
Right.
that right? I thought that
Yeah,
was one of
so
the
it
statistics.
proportionally
So,
affects women of color. So I think
mhm,
women of color make up 11% of the population, if I'm not mistaken. And that's
mhm,
statistic, don't quote on me, but I think it's 11.
I'm sure.
And it affects 1 in 3 of women that are trafficked are women of color. So
Mm,
it proportionally affects more women of color for sure. Yeah.
mhm. So you had mentioned, so I do teach. I teach like once or twice a month virtually for the Salt and Light Coalition. And I have to say, the reason I did it is I saw all that you were doing and how many people you're helping. And one point you just put a notice up and you're like, I need someone to teach like 1 hour a month. And I was thinking to myself, huge slacker. I'm like, I can do an hour a month because Isabel's like all in and doing so much. So I find that interesting, even though I feel like it's so little, but I love connecting and I love being a part of anything that can be done to help people who need that help to thrive. But also I think for people who are watching either now or after the fact, that idea of, we always think of excuses of what we can't do, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's we'll start with what you can do. I can clearly do this easily, even if it doesn't feel like enough. So mm. The other thing, it's like you reminded me when reading the story of how the coalition founded. In some ways, it sounds like, like the 2-year-old who's always like, well, why? 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 That's what it felt like a little bit, that you kept saying, why? What were some of the things you found that you felt like you didn't get the right answers to that revealed the gaps to helping people?
So I feel like I saw a gap and I
Hmm.
tried to build it, and I feel like I had, kind of the right background to fill it. So I knew that I could build curriculum really well, that I had done that for years. I
Hmm.
knew that something really bothered me, and I think that like why it was really weird, like was like, why didn't I get traffic? Like, why didn't that happen to me? So that was my biggest why, and it just really really bothered me that I had a very similar background. Like my father went to jail. I didn't have
Hmm.
parents like anything. So why is it, And I think the answers actually to that question are the ones to led me to build the curriculum the way it is. And so the main why was, why not me? And it's
Hmm.
interesting because usually everybody asks me like, are you a survivor? Are
Hmm.
you survivor trafficking yourself? And I'm not, and it's
Hmm.
weird. It's not very normal actually for a non-survivor of trafficking to start an anti-trafficking
Hmm.
organization, but here I am, and it was definitely the why was, why not me?
Hmm.
And it
And
allowed.
what were some of those things though? Because it sounds like you felt a really strong affinity with the why not me. And so you did mention growing up with your father in prison. Were there some other factors that are typical, I guess, of women who've been
Well, yeah. So
you
I was
know,
in an abusive
trafficked?
relationship. I had,
Mm,
I was, my first husband was 16 years older than me.
mm,
He was in the FBI most wanted list. And so
mhm,
all of those things are very similar to some of the things that happen to the women that are trafficked. And
mhm.
so when I looked at those parallels and I looked at, their situation
Wow.
and mine, that's what kind of really kind of drove that why.
Mhm. And what are you mentioned some of the safety nets in terms of like the strong mom or probably even just I don't know if socioeconomic class had something to do with it, but you mentioned some of the nets that you had. So what were some of the things that you went out to deliberately create then for the women that you serve?
So I think the values that we try to create at Salt Lake Coalition, one is a very tight
Mhm,
community. A lot of the women at Salt Lake Coalition, they've always seen other women as competition. We want them to have a
mhm,
really tight community. Like I think one
mhm,
of the
mhm,
ways you meet any graduate of Salt Lake Coalition is like, wow, they really stay in touch with us. Like they really want to be like we tell them like we want to be your family, and it's true.
mhm,
We want to create a very tight community that is based on love and non-judgment. So
mhm,
like that's like one of my main value, non-judgment. If you talk to any
mhm,
of the women of Salt Lake Coalition, one of the things that they'll describe is that they don't feel judged ever. They can share anything and they don't feel judgment. So those are the things that I really wanted to have, that, a space where they feel safe,
mhm,
where they gain control of their bodies, where they can be educated and they can, learn skills for the workplace. Where they can, get a chance. We work specifically with partnerships to place these women in the workplace. And these are people that know us, and they give them a chance because they know that we are giving them a set of skills, a certain education. So those are kind of the things that I wanted to have there.
And then how do you identify people? How do women get in? How do women become thrivers with the Salt and Light Coalition?
So we start interviewing women probably 3 months before the program, and we're looking for a specific set of criteria with partner organizations. We work with every partner, with every organization in Chicago that provides service to trafficking survivors. So some of these are Haymarket Center, Traffic Free, Stop It, you name it, Restoration 61. All of these are shelters, or like that first step outside of trafficking, right? And so we work with them and we connect with them and say, hey, we're looking for thrivers right now. And this is the set of criteria that we're looking for. Women need to be clean for 6 months. They need to have a place of residence. They need to have all of this, because we want to make sure that women are really ready for the next step of being placed at the workplace. We do interviews. We know what we're looking for now. And
interesting.
Yeah, and then we choose about 20 to start in January, and then 20 to start in July. So we just started a cohort now in January.
How many cohorts have you run? How many people have you served so far? How many cohorts?
So cohort 8 just started in January, and then we're going to have cohort 9 start in July.
Can you talk a little bit? Because one of the big surprises to me is, so in becoming a volunteer with you, we had to go through a whole curriculum to learn about trafficking. And again, people are watching live. We invite you to say hello. We don't know if you're here unless you say hello, and also welcome your questions. Can you talk a little bit? Because I had no idea how much trafficking was going on. It really, just in terms of the numbers, and it feels like it's a real epidemic, that people don't think of that in the US. We think, oh, it wouldn't happen here.
So this is not a number that I made up, right? This is a study from the University of Illinois. The name of the scholar is Charles Humamenu. And he estimates that 25,000 women a year are trafficked in the city of Chicago every year. So just to put that into context, that's 2 women each hour of each day.
Wow.
And it is an epidemic. The thing is that we live, in certain areas of the city, and we don't see it because it's mostly happening in certain areas of, I would say, in the west side and the south side. And so I feel like people live in this bubble and they're not seeing what's happening out there. Yeah.
Are there things that, so obviously supporting the Salt and Light Coalition, are there things that people can recognize to know if trafficking is going on, let's say near them, or things that people can do?
I mean, there's there's a huge list of red flags that you can be looking for with your child or students or whatever. But before I go into that, like 1 or 2 red flags does not constitute a trafficking situation, right? You need seeing several of those red flags over and over and over for you to even think about. But if a teenager all of a sudden has an older boyfriend, has tattoos they cannot explain, maybe has a fake ID that they cannot explain where it comes from, starts getting treatments or phones or things that are more expensive that they don't have a job for, or the parents can't afford, starts dressing all of a sudden in a more sexy manner. That's another thing that survivors describe. What else? The person might be fearful of the police, might be fearful of authorities, does not want to get them involved. Often too, the trafficking situation feels more like a bad relationship. So they don't necessarily know, or it will tell you that they're trafficked. They will just think that the boyfriend is just aggressive or it's a bad relationship, but they love them. And so it's almost like often traffickers, they don't use force because they don't want to get caught, right? So they use something called finesse. They will create a bond with this vulnerable person, and then the person will start doing things because of love, because they feel like they owe this trafficker something. And so those are some of the red flags that you can identify. And there is an anti-trafficking hotline you can call if you identify those red flags. But again, if you see one thing, it does not mean your child is being trafficked. It does not mean that you have to see several of those things.
Sure.
over and over
Is
again
that hotline? What's the hotline? Is that easy? Is it easy to remember?
by heart. It's like let me real quickly look up.
Okay. Otherwise, I can always put it in the comments afterwards.
And this is a
So,
great hotline because it's not a governmental organization. It's a nonprofit. It's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888-373-7888.
okay, I'll put that up. So 888-373-7888. So if people
Yeah.
thought they saw something. So I want to go back a little bit to I don't know how you do everything. So we've talked about, the issue that it is, the organization that you founded. How do you balance everything? Because like how many hours are you doing? You've got a family, you've got kids, you've got a husband, you're doing this, and then, staying in shape, everything that you do. How do your days look like?
So my day looks like a very controlled chaos. That's what my day is like, and I'm okay with it. I think that I was born and raised in Brazil. I'm okay with chaos. I'm okay with screaming people. I'm okay with being late, and basically that's kind of how my days are. I have to easily let go of perfectionism, and I'm not too hard on myself. I do try to make time for myself though. So for example, right now my daughter is e-learning, and I'm turning 40 next year. I have this 40-year-old plan that I'm trying to stick to. So yesterday she was doing e-learning and I was working out, and I was trying to answer questions and as I'm working out, right? So there's definitely a lot of multitasking, a lot of trying to make things that fit. But I think that at the end of the day, I try to make myself a priority too. So that if I have to wake up at 5 a.m. to work out, I do it.
Sure.
Or I try to fit it in during the day as I'm doing something else. Sometimes I work out as I'm walking in the treadmill. But I think that at the end of the day, you need to know what your priorities are. And my priority is my family and, and like myself. And I try to make everything else fit. Somehow my days work. Sometimes I'm in bed at 10 o'clock at night and I'm still working. But it works. I feel like when you're passionate about something, you just kind of make it work. You know what I mean? You make time for things.
It's interesting as you're saying that, because sometimes people forget, I don't know who those people are, but sometimes people forget when you're doing something that's so purpose driven. What you've actually made me realize though, is you're also a very accomplished businesswoman, because you're also you've got a board of directors. I think you have a junior board as well. You have staff. So you're also running a big organization. And I would imagine that you've got huge fundraising responsibilities.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I hate fundraising, by the way. It's like the worst. But I do it somehow. I don't know. It's funny. I used to joke that I couldn't even sell in Brazil. There's a saying, and it says, I can't even sell glasses to the blind. But it's so funny because I hate fundraising. I hate sales. But with Someone Like Coalition, I have to do a lot of fundraising, and it comes naturally to me somehow. But yeah, I do a vast majority of what I do is fundraising. Yes. And it's coming to that time of the year where I start looking into our gala and sending things out. So I've been working on that lately. But yeah, but I
and
feel
of course people can support by going to saltandlightcoalition.com. The people can make donations there on the website for sure.
I mean, there's different ways you can support Someone Like Coalition. Obviously, by making a donation, that's quick and easy. If you want to get involved, we're fully volunteer run. I'm a volunteer myself. I'm a volunteer CEO. I kind of, have given my life and my professional life to this cause. But you can also provide jobs. If you are running a business here in Chicago and you want to partner with us, provide jobs, internships to the women, we would love to hear from you. So
and I imagine all topics, right? They're interested in all kinds of things. Are there any specific?
Yeah, there is a wide range of abilities and wide range of interests. So we are looking to talk to any business, really. We have women that work in offices that are office managers. We have women that are managing accounts. We have women in warehouses. We have women in kitchens. We have people that clean. So it kind of depends, and we can really utilize any partnership that we have.
So what's nice about that is for people getting involved, sometimes you have big national organizations where there's no direct connection to actually the people that you're helping. And with Salt and Light Coalition, it is, like you said before, that's a goal of the organization, to be so personal. So you're
Right.
really helping specific people and making a difference. You know, it's like that idea of each one reach one, that we each have the power to make a difference in another person's life. And if everyone's doing that, you know, everyone's better.
For sure.
Yeah. So, Isabel, you can tell I'm like a huge fan. I'm so impressed at everything that you do, and now even learning more about your story in terms of how you got to where you are. This show, it's the idea of that spark inside you that drives you to spark change in the world. What would you say is that spark at the center of what everything you do?
So I'm a woman of faith, and I remember one day coming out of the Cook County Jail, and I really think that God spoke to me that day, and that He wanted me to start Salt and Light Coalition. So my spark is definitely my higher power, is definitely God in my life, and I see Him every day at Salt and Light Coalition. I see Him guiding us. Like last year, for example, 2020 was a hard year, and we fundraised as much as we did the year before. And so I feel like He's at the center of it. He guides what we do, and that is my spark.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Isabel, for joining us today on Intercultural Spark. Absolutely fantastic. And thank you for all you're doing, all the good that you bring to the world.
Thank you, Deanna.
You're welcome.